Mm.
Good evening and welcome to the breakdown. I am Tara Setmayer. This is the Rick Wilson, and we are only a few days away from the end of this godforsaken year of 2020 and 22 days away from Joe Biden being inaugurated as president of the United States. I hope everyone had a wonderful holiday, a wonderful Christmas for those of you who celebrate that. We had a very fun and very retro Christmas in my house. And I'm just glad that we were able to do it safely. And it's important to have joy and cheer and life at this time of year because so much tragedy has happened. And it's just nice to be thankful and have holiday cheer. If you guys follow me on social media, you know that it's a big deal around here in the Setmayer household. We do it big for Christmas. So that was awesome. Rick, how was your Christmas?
Very well, thank you. Very well indeed. I wish everyone else watching tonight and out there in the world a Merry Christmas, Happy Hanukkah, all the other winter holidays, whether you celebrate the solstice or Christmas, I'm down with you. So, no, it was great. It was great.
Anything special? Any special gift for Christmas that you got this year?
Just, the inevitable knowledge that Donald Trump's end is near. That's
How
that's
did
the
I know
greatest
that
gift
was?
of all, isn't it?
I teed it up for you. I teed it up for you.
You
We
did.
were
You
very
really did. You made it easy.
Yes, yes. We were very excited because this year we had a game theme and we have retro arcade games now in the house. Ms. Pac-Man, Street Fighter 2. We're like never leaving the house
Nice.
ever. I know. We've got Canada
Nice.
on the way. Like it's ridiculous. So we're a bunch of big kids in my household and we're excited about that. So we're also excited about tonight's show. We have some great guests for you. We have a little bit of a different show tonight, and I think that our viewers and Lincoln Project supporters will be appreciative of tonight's show and our guests and the conversations we're about to have. We're going to teach you how to have difficult conversations with your difficult MAGA friends and family, both on the COVID issue and also on the issue of really just how to deal with them. We're going into a new year, and I think a lot of folks want to start anew. We'll have a new president, a new administration, we have a vaccine. There's a lot new happening and a lot to look forward to, but you still have those MAGA friends and family to deal with. And when you have 75% of Republicans believing that Joe Biden didn't win fair and square, um, they're not going away. So tonight's guests, we're going to have some conversations about that. First, we're going to talk to Linda Ong and Dr. Lawrence An from the Protector Coalition about how to get through to skeptics about COVID, how to have more COVID responsible behavior, and how to talk to them. And then we're going to talk to Sister Simone Campbell, who will join us to explain, like I said, how to talk to those people in your life who have gone full Trump. So stay tuned for that. And before we get to them, we're going to talk to our Lincoln Project brethren down there in Georgia, Nate Nesbitt, to get an update on what's going on down there, since we only are 1 week away from the runoff election and there's a lot happening down there. As always, we want your questions. So please tweet us at hashtag AskTheBreakdown. If you want to send us some of your New Year's resolutions, we'd like to hear what they are because everybody likes to do New Year's resolutions. Let's hear from you. Tweet us at Ask the Breakdown. That's the hashtag, or ask us some questions, particularly for our guests. Let us know, put their names in it. And also, you can join us New School through the Zoom room there. There's our meeting ID, and we may invite you live on air to ask a question. So, Rick, um, there's only been a little, most of us have been trying to take a break and trying to decompress from politics and all of the ugly that's going on and the insanity of this White House. But no, Donald Trump won't let us. He continues to infect our lives and infect our Twitter feeds and, our pictures of our Christmas trees and stockings. And no, we have Twitter tantrums by Donald Trump tweeting insane things about, fraud and threatening Republicans for not supporting him and vetoes. And oh my goodness. So let's take a look and catch up with what's happened over the last week since we were all together.
America's COVID crisis marked a new milestone today.
About 1 in every 1,000 Americans have been killed by the illness.
The outgoing president is still creating chaos and uncertainty right down to the wire.
The president changed his mind last night after nearly tanking a deal which was negotiated by his own negotiators.
The president's reversal came after he held onto the bill for nearly a week, letting unemployment benefits run dry for millions.
President Trump is getting backlash for a wave of new pardons. His former campaign chairman, Paul Manafort, confidant Roger Stone, and Charles Kushner, his son-in-law's father, all were granted pardons.
If you supported the president, that helped you out. And if you lied about Russia, well, you're now good to go.
As the president continues to plot with House Republicans to sabotage the counting of the electoral votes.
Donald Trump's refusing to concede the election, but the transition is still moving forward. But now Joe Biden is saying that it's not going as smoothly as it should.
We just aren't getting all the information that we need from the outgoing administration. It's nothing short, in my view, of irresponsibility.
Joe Biden needs partners in the U.S. Senate.
More than 2.1 million Georgians have already voted.
In an election that will ultimately determine which party will control the Senate.
If we want COVID relief, then we have to elect senators, like we're doing here in Georgia on January 5th.
We didn't miss anything. Nothing interesting going on.
Yeah, pretty quiet, really, right?
Jeez. Well, I want to say one thing before I bring Nate in. Many of you know that I worked in Capitol Hill, and we talked about the pardons and commutations issue, and how I worked on a major pardon and commutation case for 2 Border Patrol agents back when I was a congressional staffer, and I dedicated almost 3 years of my life to that case and was able to get them commuted and released from prison. They were facing 11 and 12 years there. And Donald Trump actually granted those guys, agents Ramos and Compion, full pardons. Unfortunately, a lot of the other pardons that were issued were terrible and, an affront to our justice system. But I will say I'm grateful that my border agents, Ramos and Compion, were fully pardoned, and former Border Patrol agent Gary Brugman, another very close friend of mine, who was unjustly prosecuted and sent to prison for 27 months and ruined his life. He was fully pardoned as well. And so that is the only thing that I will thank Donald Trump for doing the right thing. And I'm glad to see that their lives were made whole. So I just wanted to say that, and because I would be intellectually dishonest if I didn't actually admit that there was something good that Donald Trump did. And I'm happy for them and their family. So with that, let's bring in our National Press Secretary, Nate Nesbitt, and talk a little bit about Georgia so we can really stick it to Donald Trump and get 2 Democrats voted into office and kick Mitch McConnell out of there as majority leader. What's up, Nate?
Well, hopefully he does another good thing pretty soon and leaves the White House. I think we're all hoping on that. Just working the hell out of Georgia. That's all that's up today.
So the runoff is 1 week from today officially, right? And
Yes,
a lot
it
of
is.
people have already early voted, which is extraordinary. 80,000 more people have voted already at this point than did during the November general election, which is very encouraging. So what's it looking like on the ground? How's it looking there? Because I know, Nate, you've been working your ass off, pounding the pavement and getting things done on behalf of Lincoln Project. So tell us what's going on down there.
I think it's extremely busy. I think through our partnerships at this point, we've knocked almost 6 million doors, which is quite a bit, given that it's only been about a month that folks have been on the ground. Like you said, votes are already flowing in. I think we're around 2 million votes thus far, and decidedly in favor of Democrats at this point. There's been a number of returned ballots, which we think, again, are heavily in our favor. And it seems as if the work that we've done with our strategic partners and with a few of these groups, Black PAC and Fair Fight, leading the way on the ground, it seems like the work is paying off. So the prospects are looking reasonably good. I'm a betting man, and so I want to be tentative on kind of where I stand on it. But my fingers are crossed, and I think if we continue to do the work we're doing, then we're going to win these races.
Hey, Nate, I want to dive in a little bit more to some of the early vote numbers that are coming in. I mean,
Yeah.
although everyone knows that Georgia is a red state, it's a very red state in many, many ways. And although Joe Biden was able to be victorious there, it is still a state that is quite Republican everywhere outside of Metro Atlanta and parts of Metro Savannah. But you're seeing some early vote numbers that are pretty encouraging. Can you dive into those a little more deeply?
Yeah, I mean, I think we've seen about around 53% of the total vote has been absentee and early vote thus far, if I'm not mistaken, and don't quote me on that. I'm kind of shuffling through a million different numbers right now. And given what took place in the general and kind of the apparatus that Fair Fight and a few of these other Dem groups have built over the span of time that they've been down here, they've made it such that Democrats have distinct access and are aware of early voting as a mechanism to fight suppression of the vote. And so between absentee and early voting, we're seeing, like I said, pretty high numbers, nearly 700,000, if I'm not mistaken, of the hard partisan vote in Democrat favor at the moment, out of roughly, I think, that 2 million. And we're pretty confident that the votes that it'll hold. I think what it's going to come down to is what turnout looks like on election day, and in the span of time between now and then. We like I said, we've got our fingers crossed, and we're going to continue to hit the ground every day to see if we can uphold these numbers.
Hey, Nate, I wanted to ask you specifically about an effort that you helped coordinate with the rapper Common. I don't know if a lot of people know that Lincoln Project was involved in helping Common get there on the ground, and he did some pretty extraordinary get out the vote work there. Talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, well, we've actually got a pretty extensive history with Common. I'd like to see if we can get him on the show pretty soon to talk about it. For the general, he did Florida, North Carolina, he did Philadelphia, he did Atlanta, and he also did Texas for us. And then he decided that he'd like to come on down here and help, and was very eager to help us in the ways that would help most. We know that Atlanta is kind of, what everybody's focused on here. And kind of a portion of our theory of the case has been, can we make sure that we touch those rural counties? Can we make sure that we reach out to those people who are not getting the attention in this situation? And Common was very eager to do so. He came on down, immediately hit the ground running. He cut a few ads for some of our partners, NAACP, Georgia Alliance, Black PAC, a few others, did some radio spots, and then he went on out on a bus tour. We went to Savannah and Augusta, and we door knocked and we canvassed. We did so in the cold for about, I'd like to say about 10 hours combined, and knocked a few hundred doors and met a few thousand voters. And it was an amazing experience. He's a natural at it. He loves the work, and it was tremendous.
We like to say that Common is one of those conscious rappers. He's been around a long time. He's one of the greatest, and it's encouraging to see him step up and use his celebrity to do something as important as getting out the vote, because people like him have influence over the younger generations, and particularly with Black men who think that the system is not for them. Common can speak their language, and I think it's important, and I'm glad to see more and more artists and people in the industry recognizing the importance of not only the presidential election this year. A lot of people got out there, but this is a runoff, for God's sake. When's the last time people were like, the political epicenter was in Georgia for a runoff race, two actually, because so much hangs in the balance down there. So great job down there, Nate. Rick, do you have anything else?
You're killing it, Nate. You're killing it.
And just one more point.
Yeah.
Before you go, Rick, not only has it been Common that's worked with us and has been down here as a voice of the people, and as someone who understands the strength of their voice. I mean, T.I. has worked with us down here. Offset,
for sure.
They just had a panel the other day with Common and Killer Mike, and a few other individuals, Jermaine Dupri. These people have been at the forefront of this fight. They've been offering their time. They've been willing to work, and they've been doing good work. Like I said, it's one thing to cut in a spot, which takes 20 or 30 minutes. for one of these individuals. It's another thing to say, hey, I'm gonna, put on my running shoes and let's knock doors in 40-degree weather in the middle of rural Georgia.
Right.
And these are people who want to get the vote on out.
Well, that is something that I really want to salute you, Nate, for spearheading the Lincoln Project's efforts in Georgia. And folks, this is one of the things that we do as an institution, as an organization, is we know when to partner with people. We know when other people have a skill set we don't have. We know when other people have an experience base we don't have, or a way to touch a constituency or an audience that we don't experience. And so, again, Nate, I just want to really salute you. You've really been crushing it down there. You got about a week to go, then you get some time off. And
well deserved.
We will see. We will see. But, I was telling folks I will definitely have a few drinks on Tuesday night. So,
one or two.
Hopefully, we'll all be cheering. We'll be toasting to you, and that's a great reminder. Thank you, Nate. Perfect segue that we will be back on air next Tuesday to talk about all things Georgia. Hopefully, we'll toast on air if we have some results. Maybe not. Maybe we will. But that's when we'll be back next Tuesday. We'll talk Georgia, and also we'll talk about what's going to happen the next day on January 6th, which is usually a pro forma activity there at the House of Representatives to accept the certification of the Electoral College. But no, not in the era of Trump.
As Donald Trump calls it, the day of Pence's true betrayal.
Yes, indeed. So make sure you guys stay tuned and come back to us on January 5th next week. Nate Nesbitt, thank you. We love you, brother.
It was a pleasure. Talk to you all soon.
Oh man, that race down there. If people want to know, the Atlanta Journal-Constitution has a really good breakdown of the early vote by county, who's voted now. So that's a good resource to go look if you're really interested in kind of the numbers. If you're nerdy like me and you read the Atlanta Journal-Constitution, they have really good stuff on the breakdown of the vote. And I also saw that Reverend Warnock and John Ossoff, they were like hanging out at a hip hop concert in a Baptist church parking lot as part of a get out the vote effort, which I think is awesome because it just goes to show you that they are still pounding the pavement. Yeah, we'll take it. The more the merrier. Let's do it. Good for them. And I think that's also a good segue into our latest Lincoln Project ad in Georgia called The Dream is Still Alive. Let's take a look.
The dream still lives. From the urban streets of Atlanta
to the humming ports of Savannah,
from the Chattahoochee Forest down through Macon,
all the way down to Valdosta,
the dream lives on.
The dream of a Georgia where we are stronger together, where we can all grow and build and prosper.
And be proud of the intertwining of our communities.
Where we help our neighbors and mourn our losses.
We still believe that hope is far more powerful than hate.
Georgia just voted out the politics of hate, bigotry, and anger.
And chose the clear path for better lives for all Georgians.
Not just the filthy rich, not just the privileged few.
For whom party matters more than Providence. No.
The dream is very much alive in Georgia.
Because an outstretched hand is always better than a clenched fist.
Believe in the dream. Use your vote on January 5th.
For Georgia.
For America.
The Lincoln Project is responsible for the content of this advertising.
Well done there, Mr. Wilson, considering the idea that a reverend of Martin Luther King Jr.'s old church, Reverend Warnock, is in this race. The idea of the dream is still alive and that theme, incorporating that, I think, was very apropos. So well done, my friend.
I've got a good team.
Yes, indeed. Let's bring in our next guest. Let's talk a little bit about COVID responsible behavior and a new campaign that's going on out there. I'm so excited to chat about this because I think it's unique and new. Let's bring in our next guest. We've got Linda Ong and Dr. Lawrence An. Linda and Dr. An are partners in the Protector Coalition. It's an effort to model and normalize safe COVID behavior with an emphasis on empathy and meeting people where they are. Linda is the founder and CEO of Cultique, a boutique cultural insights and strategy firm. She's a messaging expert and a veteran at that, very good at it. And Dr. An is a general internist and associate professor of internal medicine at the University of Michigan, where he is the co-director of the Center for Health Communications Research. Welcome to you both.
Thank you so much for having us.
Linda, I'm going to start with you. Obviously, you have seen a lot of resistance to wearing masks and just general good COVID behavior. And now we have the vaccines coming out, and we know that there's some vaccine skepticism out there. We still see that only about 63% of the American people said that they will get the vaccine. So that still leaves a significant number that said that they won't. And without that, we still cannot achieve herd immunity. And you were inspired to put this this campaign together called the I Am a Protector. Talk to us a little bit about what that is. You're a messaging expert, and you talk a little bit about what's been missing in the COVID behavior campaigns out there now. So you came up with something different. Talk a little bit about what inspired it and what it is.
Absolutely. Thank you both. And thanks to Nate for that update on Georgia. That was really inspiring. The first week of the pandemic, I was really distraught because who wasn't? And what I realized in talking to some friends was that there was an opportunity for the media and entertainment industry, which I work almost exclusively in, to really step up and take a larger role in messaging. We know that, in 9-10 months, we've had unprecedented innovation in medicine and scientific advances in vaccine technology. We should be equally looking at how we communicate all these advances to the everyday person. And what we found early on in connecting with both the University of Michigan as well as USC's Annenberg Hollywood Health and Society, which is a liaison between the medical community and Hollywood, as well as Yale School of Public Health, is that nobody was really concentrating on how do you message to people who are resistant to being messaged to. And this is really the crux of what we think is a way to widen the aperture of the way these messages get put out there and accepted, is not to just hammer people over the head and lecture them or shame them, even when it's well-intentioned. But there is a large proportion of the population, 1 in 3, and Dr. An will talk about that, that are just wired to resist being told what to do. And I know that because my mother's like that. My best friend is like that. These are not unusual people, but we've seen them come out in droves, a lot of MAGA folks in particular with masks. So we really wanted to understand how we could reach these people by meeting them on their own terms, exactly like you said, empathy. So I was fortunate enough to meet the team at Michigan, and they happen to have a specialty in behavioral science called reactance. So I'll let Dr. An talk about that.
Dr.
Yeah,
An?
so thank you so much. Yeah, so we're so fortunate and happy to be able to work with Linda and to be able to come and speak to you and your audience here tonight. The work that we were doing is trying to understand people's attitudes and behaviors related to the coronavirus. I think, like Linda, we were all distressed by what we were having a hard time initially understanding is why common seemed like public health and safety practices were not being uniformly adopted. What we found in our work, and this is based on sort of national surveys as well as focus groups and interviews, is that there really, regarding coronavirus and COVID safety practices, there really were these separate dimensions of thought. There's the traditional health and safety dimension of beliefs, but then there's also another dimension of beliefs which was very prominent about rights and freedoms. And what we were finding is people that have strong endorsement of rights and freedoms, that those beliefs were sort of trumping health beliefs and resulting in people not following either safe social distance practices or not following recommendations around mask wearing and other protective behaviors. The interesting thing we found also was that we hear a lot about it when public health or health leaders speak about the risk and the dangers related to the coronavirus. What we found is that a person's belief in the risk to themselves, it did not reduce their adherence to these negative attitudes about safety. If they believed that it violated their rights and freedoms to follow social distancing, more emphasis on the health risks and dangers really weren't reaching those people. What we did find is that as opposed to risk to self, people who were more sensitive or concerned about the potential risk for others, that was one of the few things we found really reduced this negative reactant type of behavior.
So, in your research, what was the percentage of people that you found that are these, reactor people? It's pretty large, right?
Yeah, so we ask a set, and these are sort of tools and questions that have been developed by health psychologists over many years, scales around reactance. There are items like, when I'm told what to do, I like to do the opposite, or I become angry when my freedoms and choices are restricted. What you'll find is that lines up really well with the vaccine hesitancy data that you were talking about earlier, where between 30 to 40% of the population sort of leans that way. They tend to be a little bit reactant. And there's about a 10 to 15% of the population we found that's pretty hardcore, that will very strongly react negatively to that being told what to do. So that's a pretty substantial segment of the population, and an important population to reach if we're going to make collective progress in controlling the coronavirus.
Rick, I think you fall into that category. You don't like people telling you what to do.
Yeah, but there's a difference between being independent and being murderously stubborn, and Dr. On's description of these folks, it's so disheartening in some ways, because it has become a sort of embedded into the politics of people, particularly a lot of folks who support the president, this sort of defiant disorder against anything from an expert or an authority. And so this rejection of expertise, our friend Tom Nichols has written this book about that, this idea that anyone who tells you something that, who comes from a background of education or experience or professional development, must be trying to oppress you, must be trying to take away your freedoms, must be trying to harm you in some way. I just find it so troubling and so disturbing. And it's one of the things I hope that this program can help address in a meaningful kind of way.
Yeah, I think we have a chance to do that. If I can share a little bit of a personal story that was an inspiration for this work. So about the same time that Linda called us and we started our collaboration, I was sitting there looking at this survey data, being very puzzled about what's going to make a difference for this very reactant resistant group. And I received a call from a friend of mine, we'll call him Adam, who will say is, let's say, independent, rightward leaning, and not the type of person who likes to be told what to do. And the interesting thing is he called me to talk about COVID safety practices and how could he be more safe and be more safe for himself and his family. And the way he explained it, he says, my wife has some medical conditions which put her, we think, maybe, and he used the term maybe, at really high risk of COVID. And because of that, even though I'm not sure that I believe all of the things that people are saying, I really don't want to take that risk with her health. And it was that conversation and his concern about his wife. And, just if you knew Adam a little bit, so like Rick here, he's a big, strapping, manly man. And a veteran from the Air Force, a gun enthusiast, a rock guitarist, and not the type that you think would be very necessarily adherent. He was very concerned and very dedicated, and I think it's very consistent with his core values. And well, if we have time, we can talk a little bit more about some of these communication strategies. It's very consistent with his core values, his sense of self to be protective of the people he loves. And that was motivating him to be very meticulous in his COVID safety practices, so much so that he would reach out to me for us to have a conversation about how to be more safe. And it was really the combination of Linda reaching out to me, us looking at this survey data, trying to solve this puzzle, and that conversation with Adam, which gave rise to this notion of the Protector Project.
I'm glad that you shared that anecdote, Dr. On, because it's important for people to see human interest stories. People who look and sound like them, or look and sound like their neighbor, their husbands, their brothers. Um, our good friends over at the Republican Voters Against Trump used a similar technique where they took testimonials of Republican voters and how they went from supporting Donald Trump to no longer supporting him and their reasons why. And that was an effective campaign for them because it gave people safe harbor that they weren't alone. So, using the example of Adam and the demographic that he comes from is someone who, on paper, you wouldn't think would be sensitive to good COVID behavior. And here it shows you that there are people out there that can be reached, and there are ways to reach them. When I was talking to my husband about this, he was joking about, well, I'm like that, where he doesn't like to be told what to do. If you say, don't do this, he'll be like, why? And he'll do it anyway. I want to find out why, and I'm like, you're not that bad of a reactive, but he understood that because people really don't like to be told necessarily what to do. But when you reframe it in a way that makes them feel as though they're doing something, not only for themselves, but for others, it seems as though that is more effective. Can you give a couple of examples of how that works in real life, specifically this messaging, the protector messaging for COVID?
Yeah,
Actually,
so I think
if I could,
go ahead,
I was
Linda.
going to make a distinction. Yeah, I just wanted to make a distinction. When we're talking about concern for others, we're not talking about wider society. We're talking about like your sister-in-law who's pregnant, or your child who has asthma, or your mother who's elderly. And I think that is really the distinction, because when messaging has been going out before, it has been very much about do it for yourself or do it for society. But it hasn't yet really focused on something that I think is why I really believe this protector angle is the most inclusive of all kinds of beliefs, especially people who really covet their civil liberties, which is it's the ultimate in both self-interest, which is it's somebody I care about, as well as self-sacrifice. I might adopt a behavior. I might wear a mask, not because I believe I need it, but because someone I care about needs it. And I think that's where we see the ability to convert people. And the other thing I will say, just in terms of stories, what we heard from the focus group was that multiple focus groups is that the people who are acting in this capacity currently, whether they're caregivers who are formally in the role or people who are just protecting loved ones, feel very lonely and isolated. And they feel that if this role was elevated in culture, more people would be encouraged to adopt it. And that it also has the ability to diffuse conflict. So when they were approached for wearing a mask or social distancing, and people gave them a hard time, and they indicated they were doing it on behalf of someone else, those people actually backed off and really gave them the ability to engage in a conversation, which I think ultimately, when you talk about, how do you create empathy and how do you have those uncomfortable conversations with people whose beliefs are different than yours, what we're saying is don't try to shame them into it. Try to listen to them and have a conversation and really find out what's behind their fears.
That's an excellent point.
And that was one of my real motivations for wanting to come on your show, is that it was really wonderful to hear when we did our these online focus groups with people really in diverse communities across our state of Michigan who are engaging in this protector behavior. It sort of became a group therapy session where it was the first chance people had to talk to each other about this really important role. And to hear them encouraging each other to keep going was so important. And that's why we're so eager to be working with Linda and others to really raise the profile and recognition of people who are doing this incredibly important job. They've recognized, I think there's been broad public recognition of healthcare workers, essential workers, as sort of the front line in the defense against COVID. They were sort of referring to them as the home line of defense against COVID. And it was they're doing such important work, which I can, speak from both a physician and a public health standpoint. In terms of your other questions about how to have these sorts of conversations, I've had a chance to to work over many years with another faculty member here at Michigan named Ken Resnikow, who's an expert in a technique called motivational interviewing, which was originally developed to help health providers have conversations with patients around substance abuse and changing addictive behavior. So if you talk about difficult conversations, I think if there's one message to sort of drive home or to share is that we shouldn't, as Linda said, shame and guilt people. Saying should is not really effective. We sort of joke that we shouldn't should on people. It's not helpful to should on people, but rather start a conversation by asking, right? Rather than just telling. I can say this because, I'm from a profession that does a lot of telling people what to do. It's really a process of ask first, listen first, then maybe share or tell, and then ask again. So instead of saying, for example, you should do this, you should wear a mask more, you should get a vaccine, oftentimes it's helpful to start a conversation with, what are some things you're doing to help protect yourself or others from COVID? Start with that conversation. Most people will have something they're doing, which is a common ground that you can use to move forward in a conversation. So that would be, so it's a process of asking and listening first, then sharing your position, and then asking what they make of the conversation of information. It's called ask, tell, ask, or, in fancy academic speak, elicit, provide, elicit. But that's a useful strategy. The notion of starting a conversation maybe with listening rather than talking. And that can be really helpful if you're approaching a difficult or challenging conversation.
Rick, do you have another question? That can be really hard. I'm from Jersey. We don't listen all the time. We're quick to tell people, listen, you idiot, put on a freaking mask. You want to kill everybody in your family? That's what I want to do. But sometimes it doesn't always work.
I'm interested in how this sounds like a very effective interpersonal sort of technique. I'm interested in what your ideas would be on scaling that technique to broader audiences through media or social media or other sort of publicly facing, amplification channels, and not just, like I said, it sounds very effective as a one-on-one strategy, but have you thought about how you scale this up?
Linda, do you want to take the first crack at that?
We are on a crusade. We have been meeting with people in Hollywood, the studios, the showrunners, the shows, social media. We're talking to influencers. We are trying to really normalize this kind of protective behavior in society. Because what we see, this whole idea was also inspired by a conversation I had with a friend of mine who said, why can't the media industry do what we did for Designated Driver, which some people may remember in 1988, NBC embedded the Designated Driver concept and drunk driving storylines into top shows like Cheers, LA Law, The Cosby Show. Yep. And 4 years later, every studio, every network, it was all broadcast at the time for the most part, but 160 shows had woven in some kind of storyline or character or subplot. It didn't have to be, the key point. It wasn't like a very special episode. Along with an amazing effort of PSAs and Mothers Against Drunk Drivers and, other kinds of public service communications, now we know the concept of designated driver is normalized in culture. My 25-year-old son has grown up knowing he would never get in a car with a drunk driver. And, COVID behavior, safe COVID behavior, by all estimates, is going to be necessary for the next 2 to 3 years, if not longer, depending on how long it takes people to get vaccinated. So obviously the quicker we can get everyone to adopt safe COVID behaviors, whether that's masking, which also needs to continue during the vaccine period, and social distancing, or shopping early at the grocery store, all these things need to continue. And one of the best tools we have is content. We're at an era where, because of streaming and the pandemic, content is the most voraciously consumed product, right? In the country and the world probably today. So we're knocking on all these doors, trying to get people, I'm having phone calls every day. We're briefing teams, we're briefing people. So to your point, Rick, we're trying to weaponize this message across content. And we really feel that by normalizing it and not talking about it, but just being it, not saying it, right? Behaving in a protective capacity. Adopting. There's very few commercials, but American Express has done a small business commercial where they have people wearing masks. But if you look at the most television and films that are coming out, you would never know that there's a need to adopt these behaviors. And we're not saying it should be in Wonder Woman, but certainly if there's a show that's taking place in a modern era, there's an ability to just kind of reflect reality. And we actually think it's a dereliction of duty to not do so if you have the opportunity.
That's right.
Interesting.
Before we wrap it up, Dr. Ahn, I'll give you the final word.
Oh, I was just going to say another strategy we're using is actually engaging in community-based campaigning and crowdsourcing. So we're in the midst right now across many counties in Michigan that were hit hardest during the pandemic to actually engage the public in generating these messages of thanks to people who are acting as protectors in their own families and their communities. So it's this idea of sort of leveraging these personal stories and to try to recognize this really important behavior.
That's fantastic.
And if you have a personal story of protection, please reach out to us at cultique.co. There's information there and resources as well as contact. But, we'd love for Adam to be more known. He's happy to tell his story, but we need more of those because there are, hundreds of thousands of people who are already acting in this capacity, and we need to celebrate them.
That's
and
great.
that would be,
and
if I get
Yeah, go ahead.
My closing is just thank you to everybody out there who is keeping themselves and other people safe. I know it can be sometimes a challenging, sometimes a thankless job, but it's such an important job that people are doing for themselves and their loved ones.
Absolutely. Thank you guys so much for what you're doing. It's a fantastic campaign. There's a hashtag too, isn't there, Linda? Is it hashtag I'm a protector?
Yes, no apostrophe. I'm a protector. And
I'm
you
a
can
protector,
post a picture of yourself with the person that you protect or just someone that you protect. But we are looking for people to celebrate this role.
Thank you guys so much for
Fantastic,
everything
guys.
you're
Thank
doing.
you so much for the work you're doing.
Yes,
Thank you.
indeed. And be sure if you want more information, you can check it out at cultique.co. I believe we put up the web address there. Be sure to check them out and try it out on your loved ones and be hashtag a protector. All right. I believe we have a segue.
Do it.
Mr. Vice President, say a few words, please. Mr. Vice President.
Love it.
Oh,
Love it. Love it. Love it.
I love it.
Yeah,
Rick,
folks.
do you want to
Mike Pence is in hot water with Donald Trump, and
explain?
it's because he's not
Explain
going
really
to.
quick.
So really quickly, on the 6th of January, folks, Mike Pence has to preside over the U.S. Senate at the moment they're going to validate Joe Biden's Electoral College victory. And as reported this week in Axios, Donald Trump does not find this to be acceptable. It is no bueno for little Donnie. And so Mike Pence is in some big trouble with the president. We've been running an ad about it. And I think it may get even worse for Mike Pence because he is about to go in and cast this vote on the 6th, which validates Joe Biden's win, and then he's immediately leaving the country to avoid the wrath O'Donnell. It's going to be very interesting to see how that plays out in the next few days because it ain't going to be pretty.
And for those who were actually having a life during the holidays and may have missed the story, but apparently Donald Trump had no idea that Mike Pence, as the vice president, presides over this pro forma activity on the House floor of accepting and certifying the Electoral College until the Lincoln Project put out our ad and placed it in the DC media market so that Trump would see it, basically saying that, yeah, Mike Pence is going to put the nail in the coffin of your presidency here. And he was like, what? And was raging about it for days. So the Lincoln Project strikes again, getting under the skin of Donald Trump because he had no idea that Mike Pence wielded this power. So now they're trying to assert that somehow Mike Pence can overturn the election during that day and just magically appoint new electors and overturn the election. Folks, no, he cannot. Joe Biden will be inaugurated at noon on January 20th. The 6th will just be a shit show of kabuki theater. All those idiots like Matt Gaetz and Jim Jordan and the rest of them, Louis Gohmert and these idiots, they're just going to make a spectacle of themselves. But no matter what they do, Joe Biden will be the
They're going to
president on
change the
January
outcome.
20th at noon. So,
Not going to
deuces,
change the
Donnie.
outcome.
All right. Let's bring in our next guest and bring it back to civility. We'll bring it back. Let's bring in Sister Simone Campbell. She is the executive director of Network, which was founded by Catholic sisters to, in their words, faithfully embody gospel justice while igniting hope in the world. I like that mission. She's a religious leader and attorney. Sister Simone has led multiple nuns on the bus tours, driving thousands of miles across the country to connect people across differences and advocate for the common good. At the DNC this year, she gave a really moving and inspiring prayer for our nation. And tonight she joins us on the Breakdown to talk about her wonderful work. Sister Simone, welcome to the Breakdown.
Great to be with you.
I
Thanks for
wanted
being with
to,
us, sister.
Yes, this is great. I don't know if you heard earlier in the show, but we had an update on Georgia. And I know that you've had a direct involvement down there advocating on behalf of Reverend Warnock because of the attacks on his preaching and the Black liberation belief system in his church. And there's been really racist and unethical attacks on him. And you signed on to a letter of support for him. You want to talk about that a little bit?
Oh, I'm so glad you're raising that so some reality can get out into the universe, because in this hyper partisan divide times, it is getting more and more extreme. And I think the thing that is so challenging is the critique of Reverend Warnock, whom I know personally as a man highly committed to the gospel who tries to embody what Jesus taught. That is, caring for those at the margins, responding to the sick and the needy, challenging the established structure who oppresses. So my knowledge of Rabbi Warnock is at the heart of it, of being a man of the gospel. And as your last guests were just saying, it dawns on me that he's being a protector of his people and of the vulnerable. And what I think is probably fueling some of this negativity is the very fact that he is an effective protector and that he is putting himself forward in order to represent all of Georgia, not just the suburban enclaves that have traditionally been seen in these runoff elections. So I don't know. I may email Raphael to say, hey, use this image of the protector, because I think it's got really some good resonance.
Right? It's a good campaign. I love the idea. For people who are unfamiliar with what's happening, Kelly Loeffler and the Republicans are putting out these horrible ads trying to make Reverend Warnock sound like some crazy, like the Reverend Wright situation with Barack Obama back a few years ago. And 13,000 people of faith and 45 organizations signed on to a letter calling these attacks immoral and a dangerous attempt to hijack religion for political gain. And Sister Simone had a very tough statement. She said the Republican Party and Senator Loeffler claim to care about religious liberty, yet they are leading the attack on the faith of Reverend Raphael Warnock. This is a shameful stunt in the Republican effort to diminish the importance of the church and of Black Christians in Georgia. This must stop now. Tell them, sister. I love it.
Well, the thing that really just angered me so much was just before this, we had the Senate confirmation of Justice Coney Barrett, where it was put out by the Republicans that you could not possibly question anyone's faith. That was really off limits. And then about a nanosecond later, here are these very same senators who had said you couldn't touch her faith, attacking Reverend Warnock's faith. And so that was the most duplicitous, ridiculous I don't even know what to call it in polite society, quite frankly. But I mean, it really was a violation of what we hold most dear in our society when it comes to the separation of church and state, quite frankly.
Mm-hmm.
You know, sister, it's one of those things I find endlessly fascinating in our society today. There has been a transition, and our friend David French wrote a piece this weekend that, you know, what the evangelical church claims they want are prophets, but what they really seem to want are lawyers to accomplish their social goals in the courts at this point. And it strikes me as an interesting dichotomy right now, because there was always a critique on the right about uh, activist Catholic uh, folks, and going as far back as the nuclear disarmament stuff in the 70s and 80s. And there was always this critique on it of, oh, it's so unacceptable, that why are they in this? Why are they pursuing these things? Well, those things are part of gospel. Those things are part of witness.
Exactly.
And it strikes me as something that that they really have established, like in so many other areas. They want a sort of double standard about what constitutes acceptable faith dialogue in our society. And you know, and I think, and I'm sure you sort of you know, are conscious of this. You know, the sort of attacks they've launched on Reverend Warnock about his personal life, saying he's a communist, saying he hates the police. You know, these aren't just, you know, echoes of the 1960s critiques of Dr. Martin Luther King. They are Xerox copies. They are the identical line for line phrases that were used by people in the Bull Connor and Lester Maddox era of the South. And it's a striking moment how shamelessly they've deployed this against him.
Well, and it's also shocking how much resonance it still has, these racist tropes that they put forward in order to undercut anyone who doesn't meet the white perspective, the white standard. And Rick, I have to say that when your first line there in that little section where you were speaking was, you said that whether they really want profits. Well, I think the thing with the evangelical often is that alignment with the monetary profits, not the visionary, not the visionary goals of the gospel. And so the fact is that as long as my bottom line is protected, and as long as I succeed as a white person in this world, that's to be protected. That's obviously God smiling on me. But anything that challenges, that pushes, that raises questions that maybe you're not being the person that you should be, then that's a challenge that's not accepted, not acceptable to them. And then they react just with fury.
Mm-hmm. Feels a lot like idolatry to me, as opposed to, what they're supposed to be doing. As I often challenged a lot of my evangelical friends. I mean, I grew up in a non-denominational church, and watching the absolute hypocrisy and disgusting, vile behavior that has come out of church folk throughout this Trump era has been one of the most revealing and disheartening aspects of it all. And I've seen it personally, and it's just, it's hurtful. And my mom and I say all the time, God is not pleased with this. And those people who are responsible for flocks, these pastors and these preachers who are supposed to know better, they're responsible for people. What they're doing, they will be judged more fiercely. And I don't want to be anywhere near them when that time comes. And I hope that they, I hope they find some forgiveness and ask for it and repent before that, because they're in big trouble. Rick brought up Bull Connor, and I know that Bull Connor played a role in your passion for political advocacy. Can you talk a little bit about what it was about the Bull Connor era of the 1960s that inspired you so much to get involved in social justice?
Well, I was a young kid in Southern California. So I lived in the South, but it was the South of California, and watched on television Bull Connor's exploits and the water cannons turned on the children that showed up to protest in the Jim Crow South. And their courage in standing up, they didn't just do it one day, but they came again and again. And that courage of those young people to stand up to the face of this sheriff who was among the most racist people, virulently racist people in the South, shooting these children with water cannons, knocking them down. When I saw their courage, and I, as a young person, I said, if they had that courage to stand up, I needed to stand up in some fashion. I needed to stand up for justice the way they were doing. Now, I didn't have many opportunities in my tract, house in Southern California, but what I could do was then eventually, after high school, to commit my life to working for justice and to find a way forward so that everyone can live in dignity, where we don't have this racism, where we break down that racist structures that have contained our nation for so long, and to lift up the fact that if Black lives matter, then all lives can matter.
Absolutely. Before we take callers, because I know there's people that want to ask questions of you, I want to hear a little bit about your Nuns on the Bus stuff, because I think that's really fun, and some of the work that you were doing traveling around the country and kind of bridging these cultural divides between urban and rural folks and having them talk to each other. Talk a little bit about your work with that and what it reveals about the moment that we're in now.
Well, okay, so back in 2012, we had some notoriety, and so we said, what do we do with it? How do we work for mission? And so it came up that we should go on the road, we should push back against the Ryan budget, lift up the works of Catholic sisters, and make clear that the Ryan budget at that time was going to decimate our people. And so that's how it got started. But the thing that it's evolved into is being able to go into communities and to come with curiosity. We come as learners to communities that are not our own, to learn, to ask curious questions, and to listen. In that last segment, I think one of the most important things that was said from my perspective was to start with listening. Because when you come as a learner and invite people to tell their stories, magic happens. Magic happens because you see the world through their eyes, and in that very process, people feel they're not alone. So the bus is about creating community wherever we go. Now, we just did a bus trip in advance of this election, but it was all virtual. We did 65 events, all virtual, but we still called it Nuns on the Bus because that's our thing. But one of the things that we did was a dialogue across geographic divides. And so we had folks, the one that stands out in my mind is the one from Michigan. So we had folks from Detroit and from Southwest Michigan. And so I talked first to each group and then brought the groups together. And it was all broadcast. So it was like high stakes, just the way you folks do it. So what happened was the folks from Southwest Michigan were shocked to find out that Detroit city folk have a terrible time with public transit. They thought the city folk had it made, but they don't. And Detroit folks were shocked that these rural folks had problems with abandoned housing, because as people move away from the rural communities because they can't make a living, they lose their housing stock. They were surprised. And they were both shocked that they both were having the experience of healthcare facilities moving away from either the core of the inner city or very rural communities to more centralized locations. They were both losing their healthcare. But what happened was, in this dialogue, they discovered, and it's just by getting them to talk, it's not by any agenda, but it was getting them to talk about their reality and what they thought, that they had commonalities that they didn't know. They may have different solutions. They might have different ways forward. They might have different things, different approaches, but they shared a common concern. And that's life-giving. Yep. Then you know you're not alone. Isn't that glorious?
That's right. It's encouraging.
Fantastic.
Because I think a lot of people don't think that they have that. They feel very alone, especially in these times of crisis and economic crisis and health crisis. And It's empowering to see others sharing the same thing that you would never expect. And that's how we, I think, begin to repair this mess that we're in as a society. It starts there. Let's take our first caller. We have Mike from Only, Maryland. Yes? Or is it Only, Maryland?
Hi.
Only.
Yeah, I have a question. So there's a lot of, there's a lot of political divide in this country, obviously. And I'm sitting here, with my cousin, and, we go back and forth. And it's, in the end of the day, there's nothing personal about it. I mean, I enjoy debating with him, and the only thing is that we throw out our talking points, and he gives me his talking points, and I give him my talking points, and at the end of the day, you can throw it all out. We just disagree with each other when it comes to our political philosophies. So, what do you think about all this? The things that you read on social media and everywhere, this division that we have in this country, and it's all, and it turns into a lot of hatred, a lot of emotion. But
well, can I
my
ask?
cousin and
Can I
we
ask
have a good time debating it.
Yeah, well, I'm sure you do. But can I ask a question? Do you want to change it with your brother, or is that a bonding experience?
It's fun. It's a bonding experience.
Okay. Yeah. So keep at it, enjoy each other, have fun. You don't go too far. That's good. But I think what happens on social media is that it's done unilaterally to strangers who haven't agreed to this sibling rivalry. And the important part is to know that beneath this, and that's why siblings can do this. And I discovered this with my brother because I used to say my brother was my difficult relative. But then 2 years ago, I did some video thing that went viral on the internet, and he on his Facebook page, he saw that it was getting attacked. I was getting attacked. He stood up for me. He said, he wrote some things about, what I was really like. And then he said, so I'm standing up for my friend and my sister. Well, I was so touched by that. And I realized that the love that we have for each other is much deeper than what could be the political fight. And so I've worked more at trying to express the love that's underneath it than the political sparring fight that we can get into because I'm the oldest and he's the youngest and all that, family dynamic. So I think in these situations with family, we have to say, is it just a ritual way we express our care for each other and we kind of like it? Or is there something else going on and I have to ground this in saying directly, I love you and that matters more than this fight, but we can continue the conversation. Isn't that the important way forward?
I would hope so. The problem is that there are people now that, this is breaking up families. What do you say to the people who have that family member or the best friend or, the lifelong friend that won't speak to them anymore because they're so far out there with the vitriol that Donald Trump has spewed, and they buy into it, and then they now become someone that is unfamiliar to you. You're like, who are you? How do you handle those situations? Because I think a lot of people are struggling with that.
Right. I know that's the case, and that's why they have to go to the website that was just mentioned before.
Of course.
I was trying to remember. I wrote it down, but it's here someplace. But the other piece that I think is so important is to come with curiosity. I know if I'm feeling secure inside myself, if it's a good day, then I can be curious about how somebody who thinks very different from me is going to react. And so I can say, what happened? We used to be able to talk. Why can't we? I miss that. Do you? And you have to be prepared for the fact that they'll say, no, I don't miss it. But we need to ask the question, and then say, can we recover it? Can we move back?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's good.
And
That's good.
Sense of
well, let's get one more caller in. We're coming up on our time here, so let's try to get one more caller. Hello.
Hi.
Hi there. How are you?
I'm fine. I love the Lincoln Project. My question is for probably either one of you, Tara. I want to find out. I have a neighbor who I love, been knowing for over 20 years, didn't believe in Dr. Fauci, did not want to listen. Recently, she and her husband got COVID. Thank God. They were in the high risk group, recovered from it. We talk politics, we agree to disagree. I don't know how to get through with the facts. They listen to Fox News, a lot of conspiracy theory, and just believe. And I love them. We do everything for each other. But I'm in Texas in a red district, and it's really hard. And I don't know what to do. I get frustrated by it because I love them, and I was so thankful to God that they recovered, but it was scary. So what do I do?
I think
I'm going to pass that off.
I think a lot of what we.
I'm sorry. Go on.
Well, let me just jump in for 1 second. Look, I think what our earlier guests mentioned about trying to show people an empathetic side, a non-judgmental side. Excuse me. It's very difficult sometimes, and especially when you feel affection for these people, it's tough. And but it's reached the point now where it's more important than ever to try to reach over that bridge. We're at this lacuna between the crisis being uncontrollable and mass vaccinations. But in the meantime, it may help to express to them how important this last little bit is until we can get everybody vaccinated. And how important it is to keep try to play by the rules for the next few weeks and months while we get mass vaccinations underway.
Yeah, and for those relationships, it may not. You have to pick and choose your battles. I think at that point, and listening and trying to understand why it is they reject those facts, or they now lived it. It's a real experience for them. Do they still not believe Dr. Fauci, or are they still, why are they still rejecting those things? And I think you just have to make a decision about how far to go with it, because it could be something that's irreparable to your relationship if you push it, and they don't have the ears to hear. People have to have the willingness and the ears to hear to get through. And sometimes some just don't. Sister, I will let you have the last word on that.
Well, I was just thinking that maybe you could invite them to be protectors of others because they've been through it, they've struggled. And how could that you want the best for them? Could they be a protector for other people in the neighborhood, just to let people know, or to, wear the mask, be available to talk about how hard it was for them? So that protector idea, I'm going to use it anytime I can. It might work with them. It might be worth a try.
Linda, if you're still watching, reach out to Sister Simone over here. She might be a coalition partner for you on this Protector Coalition. It's great. All right, I think we have one last tweet for you. My New Year's resolution is to lose 350 pounds. It will be completed on January 20th at 12:01 p.m. Mary Miller. Oh my gosh. Yeah.
Nicely played. Nicely played.
Well done. Well done. Oh, Sister Simone, thank you so much for joining us. It has been an absolute
Sister Simone. We
pleasure.
appreciate you very much.
And
thank you.
We appreciate you. And we know that you are retiring soon after many, many years of great service. But I suspect that we will still hear from you, given your passion for advocacy and social justice. So thank you again so much for everything you've done.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
All right. Well, that is it for our show tonight. We have a simple call to action. It is to our folks out there in Georgia. If you haven't voted yet, please go out and vote.
Get on it.
You have up until January 5th. You can go in person, or you can there's still time to vote early. Yeah, let's go out there, Georgia folks, and get it done again. That's our call to action for tonight. And as I mentioned earlier in the show, we will be back next week to talk about the Georgia election and all of the craziness to expect on January 6th. So we'll be here to break it down then next Tuesday. And yeah, we'll be here for all of it. Rick Wilson, any final words before we go?
Tara, you guys have a great new year and be safe. And we will see you again next week.
Likewise. Do you have a New Year's resolution you want to share?
No, it involves not murdering people. So I'm just going to keep that on the down low. Too late.
Oh my gosh. Yes. Well, be safe, everyone. Wishing you a happy new year. And we will all hope and pray that Rick Wilson doesn't murder anyone in 2021. See you next week.
Good night, folks.
We have to have those conversations, as difficult as they are right now. I mean, the fate of the world really does depend on it. You don't actually change somebody's mind. What you do is to give them the opportunity to change their own mind. Start by not bulldozing ahead and attacking them. What happens as soon as you attack anybody is they dig in. And now they stop really listening to what they have to say. They aren't going to pay attention anymore, and they're going to solidify their position. You want to start with conversation. Then you want to put little landmines into that conversation. What you want to do is actually really engage with people to keep that conversation going. It's sort of like hostage negotiation, right? The longer I can keep you on the line, the more opportunities I have to say something that might actually have an influence. You have to actually frame it more as a conversation. We have to talk about this. I want to understand what it is that's driving you. You have to find the core values that somebody is operating with. We have lots of contradictory beliefs inside of us, but most of the time we don't have to confront them all at once.
America is founded upon the rule of law.
The president tweeting, "Liberate Michigan."
13 men now facing charges planning to kidnap and kill Michigan Governor Gretchen Whitmer.
I am your president of law and order.
It's all about people's values. You have to find the value that they have and the way that Trump contradicts that value. When you bring that contradiction to the fore, in the moment, that creates unease. And suddenly people go, holy cow, I can't believe that I supported him for this long. And that's one of the reasons why you often find that somebody is an ardent supporter for a long time, and then they shift into this other coherent framework. And I like to say we often bring data to a values fight. It's not about the data. One of the things that happens if you're a wonky kind of person, I'm a scientist, I love data, so you want to start trotting data out on your favorite topic. Data isn't going to do it. You're never going to get the satisfaction of having somebody say, you're right, I'm not going to vote for him. They're going to go home, they're going to sleep on it, they're going to wake up the next day, and then they're going to have that epiphany. There are going to be a certain number of the most diehard people who you're going to have a hard time convincing in the next 26 days. And the hardest thing that we're going to have is 3 or 4 years from now, avoiding having to say, I told you so.
Hey guys, hope you're doing well. Just watching my algorithms get crushed. I guess I did something to piss off the Instagram gods, so hopefully you're seeing this stuff anyway. We'll do what we can. Talk to you soon.